Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon. Mm, Good evening. Good to see everybody. Mm. So, just a quick announcement that it'll be just me today. Michelle is doing well, but she had a long time kind of planned procedure on Thursday that she's just needing to rest from. So she's doing that. Sends her aloha to everyone, and thanks for your allowing her that time, of course. She's doing good, and I realized we haven't made any announcements or whatever, just in terms of the hurricane, but we're fine in terms of all of that. This part of the island, didn't get it quite as bad. We did have a few days without electricity and about a day without water, but things have been sort of back to normal here-ish, more or less. Though um, some some parts of the island are still in like a total disaster, and then actually a number of places not that far still don't have power. So there's definitely still a lot of kind of infrastructure recovery kind of happening. And we are in the midst of another storm. It's passing south of us, but it is pretty windy out. Anyway, just it's a sort of warning that if the power goes out during the sitting, uh, it won't be a total surprise. But if that happens, then we'll see you next Sunday. Yeah, yeah. But it is hurricane season here, and with the El Nino and the warming waters and the warming climate, of course, it's everything feels more intense here, as in many places. So it's definitely the world we're living in and continuing to move through. And there's no period in the last week for us, and of course in weeks and months and years, where it hasn't felt that this practice and this approach and these teachings aren't like, totally fundamental and necessary and supportive for however we make it through all of it, doing so with as much sort of internal resource as possible, the internal infrastructure, as it were. So glad to be working on that today with you all again. Mm. So let's sit together for a little while. Mm. Finding our way to a relatively comfortable seated posture. Noticing if there's any tendency towards the front or towards the back or towards our sides that might cause strain over the period of time we're sitting together, and invite that kind of rectitude that isn't a strain or based on discipline so much as ease. Certain sense of alignment that allows for a stillness wherever that's possible, recognizing that that can shift over a period of time and give ourselves permission to make those adjustments if needed. Explore this relationship between mind and body, tension and ease, wisdom and compassion. Can be supportive to remember, recollect, reconnect with this acknowledgement of the body, its strength, its robustness, its resilience, as well as its fragility, tenderness, its instability and changing nature. A sense of capacity, ability, of pleasure, of limitation, of pain, of illness. We hold this range of truths in regard to the body as an aspect of wisdom. This is the way things are. As broad truths rooted in the continual, momentary relationship with the body as it is right now, one moment to the next. This range can be noted, experienced directly. Places of ease, comfort, tension, discomfort, provoking ease in the mind or strain in the mind. And also, that is a powerful source for the cultivation of care. Recognizing the fragility, joy and sorrow, fluctuation. Sometimes we're able to attune to a sense of caring, a warmth, a gentleness, a kindness, patience, compassion. appreciation in regard to the body. Not solely in abstract terms, but in the direct physical experiences that are arising and passing in the moment. The sense that any sensation can be met with kindness. The rising and falling of the breath is worthy of our care. So while the sensations are known right alongside or from one moment to the next, a sense of caring, kindness, warm-heartedness can follow. Sometimes it's a matter of receiving the breath with this tenderness, kind of kind-heartedness, softening in the mind arises. And other times it's more of a sense of infusing the breath with care, appreciation. And in fact, any other physical sensations that arise can be brought into this dynamic, received with tenderness, infused with care. A sense of all physical sensations being worthy of our love. Metta not being determined by if it's pleasant or unpleasant. The worthiness is inherent simply because it arises. So it can be a very simple, gentle, subtle sense of persistent kindness, friendliness of mind, friendliness in the awareness. And that feels good in the heart. It feels good in the body. These aspects of wholesome pleasure, supporting one another, mind and body, conditioning. And of course, any other sensations from other sense doors that may arise. Sound, smells, taste, visual impression. They enter the field of awareness, moments of contact arising and passing. They too can be brought into this connection of care, receiving, sending, abiding. Phenomena of the heart and mind, even anger, sadness, anxiety, can be met with loving kindness, not trying to change it or manipulate it. It is recognized as worthy. So we can stay primarily anchored in the breath, the body, nourishing this thirst that each has for kindness, feeling the goodness of that, the rejuvenation, the quenching quality of care. But also knowing, of course, any phenomena in our experience be cared for in this way. And all and every phenomena outside of us can be cared for in this way. Limitless extension of love, friendliness, warm-hearted care. Just finding and maintaining, continuing, repeating, exploring the connection wherever we can find it. Mm. Nice to sit with everyone. Um, I will. So I'm going to make just a couple announcements, or really one announcement, and offer a little reading, not so much a talk necessarily, and then we'll have some time for questions if folks have them. Um, Mostly, it's just the announcement is just to let folks know that I have put up the kind of registration info for the two normal upcoming programs that I have in the fall and winter. So the November, late November, early December Dhamma or Deep and Simple online retreat, and then invigorating our hearts month long of the Brahma Viharas in January. Uh, Both of those are, you can access them through the website at this point. I'll put an email out at some point in the next probably couple of weeks, but just so you know they're up there. Um, and that if there's a problem, I just haven't worked it out yet. So you can try registering, and if there's an issue, let me know. Um, but yeah, we're looking forward to getting back into a little more intensive practice with everyone. And then just today, I wanted to offer a little reading actually from the commentaries of the Karaniya Metta Sutta. The I've been kind of getting ready with our team for the kind of 4-week session that is coming up starting next Saturday, to learn the Hawaiian language version of the Karaniya Metta Sutta, learn the chanting form of that. Um, and For folks who aren't as kind of familiar, some years ago we kind of got a team of folks together to do the translation, and then someone to actually voice it in a kind of in the traditional way. And we were sort of encouraged and inspired and motivated recently to kind of get back into that part of it, because the style of chanting that this Kumu used is, it's a little complicated. It's a little bit of a complicated technique, chanting technique. I don't know, complicated, sophisticated, and subtle and nuanced. And if you don't have training in it, it takes a little bit of effort to sort of feel like you're going to do it correctly and appropriately, and sort of understand a little more of that context of that lineage. So anyhow, it's just sort of it has been interesting and really great kind of working with these folks and starting a little bit of these conversations around bringing these forms and practices and thoughts sort of together. And I think that I just so appreciate, in the sense of, if you're doing anything that starts to feel like a kind of syncretism, to be careful, right? To be kind of thoughtful and kind of open and curious, and learning about where are the places sort of easily translated, where are the places that are uncertain, or that there might even be tension, and what does that exploration look like? Because it's one thing to translate it into a different language. It's another thing to express it in a traditional form that is from its own whole lineage and world and um, methods and intentions, in terms of, there are places, of course, where the Pali chanting and the Olelo Hawaii chanting resonate in terms of just memorization, right? That for many years, this is a form that was used to help memorize and perpetuate texts and teachings. And across the world of Buddhism, of course, there's a huge range of things as well. But there's this sense also, of course, right, that the chanting tradition here is is not just about that, right? It's not just about memorization. There's all kinds of energetics and kind of potencies around what is being activated in these processes. That's, incredible and fascinating and interesting in terms of this place of exploration. So we've been talking about metta, we've been talking about chanting and talking about sort of all of these things and exploring some of it. And it just made me remember that, we chant the Karaniya Metta Sutta together a lot as a community in our retreats and different programs. We talk about many aspects of it. But one thing I think is interesting is we will often tell the story of an abbreviated version of the story of how the Karaniya Metta Sutta came to be. Why did the Buddha offer to this group of monastics this teaching? And it's a good story, but I realize like we pretty much are always kind of saying the same little version of it, and there's a little more to it, and it's really interesting. And I thought I should just read that, and there might be little things I sort of point out. It's not like a whole talk, so but because also we will read from the suttas, occasionally, and sometimes more, sometimes less. We don't necessarily read from the commentaries that much in a lot of our teaching, and it's an important. It's one of those things like it sounds so dumb to say it's an important part of lineage. It's like really important, and interesting and complicated. It doesn't, there's scholarship that is more recent that will put into question some things and here and there, but it's important to have a relationship with. So it's not super long, but it's a little long. So the the Metta Sutta shows up in a few places, but the Sutta Nipata is the, I think, most commonly recognized or one that's referred to. And okay, so here's the beginning, and it'll just take a little while. It's it's like 3 pages here, plus and then another one sort of at the end. So the commentaries, were recorded and similarly memorized, right, for hundreds of years. And at some point, kind of written down and included in the canon. So these stories are not, there a lot of them are sort of framing what the story behind the suttas are and the context on which these things are happening. And of course, to some degree, they're mythologized, and to some degree, there's something that has been passed down, right, from the times of the sutta. So this is the first layer of commentary. What is the origin? It is said that bhikkhus, and just that remind her, the term bhikkhus really, it is the male version of like monastic. So there's bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, but as in English for many long periods of time, and in many languages, the male form also is the general form, right? So it's not specific actually as to whether they're referring to female or male monks, monastics. It's the general form, and including, Sayadaw Paninanda used to say that Upandita would include all yogis when they're practicing are considered bhikkhus. So this idea of who is included in this group is unclear in terms of their demographics, but they're here really, probably more than likely monastics, right? Monastic renunciates. It is said that bhikkhus, harassed by deities on the slope of the Himalayas, went to the Buddha at Savatthi, and the Blessed One spoke this discourse to them for their protection and as a meditation subject. That is the brief account, but the following is a detailed account. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi, as the time for the rains retreat was approaching. At that time, several bhikkhus from different provinces who had learned a meditation subject from the Blessed One approached him with a wish to enter the rains retreat elsewhere. So the monastics are supposed to really spend these 3 months of the rains kind of in one place, not travel around, and really focus on their meditation practice more than anything else. The Blessed One explained meditation subjects suitable for the 84,000 different kinds of temperament in this way. To those of a lustful temperament, he taught the 11 meditation subjects on the unattractive nature of the body, by way of both the sentient, or living, and insentient, or dead, bodies. To those of having a hating temperament, he taught the 4 meditation subjects, loving kindness, and so forth. To those of a deluded temperament, he taught such meditation subjects as mindfulness of death. To those of a discursive temperament, he taught such meditation subjects as mindfulness of breathing and the earth kasina. To those of a faith temperament, he taught such meditation subjects as the recollections of the virtues of the Buddha. And to those of an intellectual temperament, he taught such meditation subjects as the delineation of the 4 elements. Then the 500 bhikkhus who had learned a meditation subject from the Blessed One went out seeking suitable lodging and a village as an alms resort. They traveled by stages until they saw on the frontier a mountain in the Himalayas that was made of stone slabs, the color of blue-green crystal. It had cool, thick shade, and it was adorned with blue-green jungle groves. The ground was strewn with sand like silver foil, inlaid with nets of pearls, and it was surrounded by pools of pure, sweet, cool water. The bhikkhus passed one night there, and in the early morning, after attending to their bodily needs, they entered a nearby village for alms. The village consisted of 1,000 families who lived in dwelling close together, and the people there were faithful and confident. Since monastics were a rare sight in the frontier region, as soon as they saw the bhikkhu, the people were filled with rapture and joy. They fed the bhikkhus and begged them, "Stay right here, Bhante, for 3 months of the rains retreat." They built 500 meditation huts, which they provided with all the necessary implements, beds, chairs, jugs for drinking water, washing water, and so forth. The next day the bhikkhus entered another village for alms, and there too people served them in the same way and begged them to stay for the rains retreat. Noting that there was no obstacle, the bhikkhus consented. They entered the jungle grove and meditated energetically all day and night. When the time gong was struck, they carried on practicing careful attention and sat at the feet of the trees. The splendor of those virtuous bhikkhus surpassed the splendor of the tree deities, who came down from their own palaces, and taking their children, roamed about here and there. So this is like the tree deities came down from their palaces with their children and wandered around, right? It was similar to a situation of when kings or royal ministers have gone to a village and occupy the space of the houses of the villagers, and the people in the houses have to come out and stay elsewhere, looking on from a distance, wondering, when will they leave? Just so, the deities abandoned their own palaces, and roaming about here and there, they looked on from a distance, wondering, when will these venerable ones leave? Then they considered, the bhikkhus have entered the first rains retreat and will have to stay here for 3 months. But we will have to withdraw, taking our children, and it will be a long time before we are able to live here again. Come now, let's show the bhikkhus frightening objects. That night, as the bhikkhus were meditating, the deities created the forms of terrifying yakas standing before each one of them. They also made frightening sounds. When the bhikkhus saw these forms and heard these sounds, their hearts trembled. They became pale and sallow. Because of this, they could not focus their minds. And with their minds scattered, repeatedly agitated by fear, they lost their mindfulness. Then, when they lost their mindfulness, the deities created foul odors. It seemed as if their brains were being crushed by the foul odors, and they experienced severe headaches, yet they did not inform one another of what was happening. One day, they had all assembled to attend on the Sangha elder, And the elder asked them, "Friends, when you entered the jungle grove, for several days your complexion was pure and bright, your faculties were serene. But now you have become thin, pale, sallow. Is something here unsuitable for you?" Then one bhikkhu said, "Bhante, at night I see frightening forms, and hear frightening sounds, and smell a foul odor, such that my mind does not become concentrated." In the same way, all reported what was happening. And the Sangha elder said, "The Blessed One has laid down 2 observances of the rains retreat, and this lodging is unsuitable for us. Come, friends, let's go back to the Blessed One and ask him about another lodging more suitable." "Excellent, Bhante," the other bhikkhus replied. And they cleared their lodgings, took their bowls and robes, and since they were unattached to families, they all departed for Savatthi without taking leave of anyone. Traveling in stages, they reached Savatthi and went to see the Blessed One. Seeing those bhikkhus, the Blessed One said, "Bhikkhus, I have laid down one training rule. One should not walk on tour during the rains retreat." "Why are you walking on tour?" They told the Blessed One everything. The Blessed One mentally inspected all the Jampubida, but he did not see another suitable lodging for them, not even a place the size of a 4-legged chair. Then he told them, "Bhikkhus, there is no other suitable lodging for you. Dwelling there, you can attain the destruction of the influxes. Go back, bhikkhus, and stay in that same lodging. If you wish to be secure from deities, learn this protective discourse. This will be your protection and a meditation subject." He then spoke the sutta. But others say that after the Blessed One said, "Go back, bhikkhus, and stay at that same lodging," he said, "Further, a forest dweller should know how to carry on. That is, in the evenings and in the morning, there should be 2 rounds of practice of loving kindness, 2 recitations of the protective discourses, 2 rounds of meditation on the body's unattractive nature, 2 rounds of mindfulness of death, and attention to the 8 great bases of urgency." The 8 great bases of urgency are birth, old age, illness, death, and the suffering in the 4 planes of misery. Or alternatively, the first 4 are birth, old age, illness, and death. The 5th is the suffering in the plane of misery, followed by the suffering rooted in the round in the past, the suffering rooted in the round in the future, and the suffering rooted in the search for food in the present. Thus, having told them how to carry on, the Blessed One spoke this discourse to those bhikkhus for the sake of practicing loving kindness, for the sake of protection, and for the sake of reaching jhana as a basis for insight. And then, having concluded the teaching at the end of the discourse, the Blessed One said, "Go, bhikkhus, dwell in that same jungle grove, and on the 8 days of the month for hearing the Dhamma, having struck the gong, recite this discourse, give a Dhamma talk, hold discussion, rejoice, and pursue, develop, and cultivate this meditation subject. Then those spirits will not show frightening images to you, but instead will wish for your good and welfare." Having replied, "Excellent," they rose from their seats, paid homage to the Blessed One, circumambulated him, went back, and acted accordingly. The deities were filled with rapture and joy, thinking, "The Venerable Ones wish for our good and welfare." And they themselves, the deities, swept the lodgings, prepared the hot water, massaged their backs and feet, and set up a guard. Having developed loving kindness as they were taught, those bhikkhus took it as a basis, aroused insight, and within that 3-month period, all attained arahantship, the foremost fruit. Then they held the great paravana ceremony in purity. In this way, those skilled in the good, in the Dhamma of one who is skilled, accomplish the good that should be done, as explained by the Lord of the Dhamma. Having done this, complete in wisdom, they made the breakthrough to the peaceful state, experienced supreme peace of heart. Therefore, an intelligent person who wishes to dwell, having made the breakthrough to that peaceful state, the deathless, marvelous state dear to the noble ones, should constantly do the good that should be done, analyzed into stainless virtue, concentration, and wisdom. Hmm. So, there's a lot, of course, to kind of go into there, but I think a few things just to sort of raise up of interest of ongoing importance in terms of teaching, in terms of practicing. This idea, even initially, right, that there's 84,000 different temperaments, and that the Buddha, who supposedly, right, had, perfect skillfulness, knew exactly what each person needs, right, to practice in order to, uh, get to where they're going. Um, and that sense of, I it's just to note this, right? That like we very few teaching lineages in the West, in Asia, right, and throughout Burma are going to be teaching that many different methods, right? Most things happen where you learn something from your teacher, you pass that along, or you figure something out for oneself and you cultivate it and you pass it along. And there's a spectrum. Of course, within the Mahasi tradition, there are really many different forms that are taught. Um, while the sort of Vipassana practice of the mindfulness of breathing is this kind of core baseline, there are a lot of other methods that are taught, trained in, and explored, and just it's worth saying about like how much controversy and like unskillful speech and um, denigration, schisming, right, can happen based on like, well, these people do this practice and we do this practice, and the method, like, are just arguments about method. And I think to really get that, like, it's so baked into the tradition that the Buddha taught many methods. There's many, and many of them are never formalized. And in some sutta, he'll sort of explain one thing that is very particular to one person. And that's how they get awakened. So, until we start having a lot more arahants around that can say this works 100% all the way to the end, I think it's like just valuable for all of us to be careful of being like, this is the way we teach, this is the way we have confidence in, we have this degree of proof and evidence and um, yeah, confidence in the lineage and in the method and the tradition, and to be careful about yeah, how much we sort of judge or create a sense of better than, equal to, or worse than in terms of all of this. That it's there's a lot of range of that. But even here, this idea that even in the formal tradition, there are different versions of a story. And in this version, this happens, or other people will say this. You'll see that a lot in the commentaries. Well, mostly this word is translated this way because we think it's a compound of these two things, but other people say it's a compound of these things. And so there's a lot, and even within the tradition, that doesn't claim to be resolved about the ultimate truth of something, right? That it's uncertain really what is really happened, and that there's a value, to that. And then I think there's many more things, but the the value of, we tend to be very human focused, human centered, and then outside of that, kind of, the physical beings and the sort of animal realm, that we can relate to and have sort of more direct experiences with. But the importance of attending to the beings unseen, to the other realms, um, is, I think, mostly what we tend to feel comfortable saying is like it's we encourage that exploration, right? We encourage the practice, we encourage the honoring of that. We don't want to make people feel like they're doing something that feels unreal or that doesn't resonate with them. We're not insisting on, um, sort of practicing in this way, but it is something very near and dear to us, and from Michelle and Steve and myself and other, for those of us who have sort of like, been in the sort of responsibility roles of Vipassana Hawaii for so many years, this is real, and that it is worth attending to that aspect of the beings in whatever valley we're in, whatever, wherever we are, especially if it's not where we're from, right? Which is part of what this story is teaching, right? That they're wandering, they're going out from their homes, they're going out from their own villages, off to the frontier where they are not known, right? Where what they're bringing and what they're carrying and their dhamma and their way of life is foreign. And they find human response to that very open and connected, and that is very fortunate, right? In this moment, I don't know how common that even would have been necessarily, but that you can't also then therefore take for granted that every plane of existence is going to appreciate your presence where you've just like decided to show up because it has like a nice place to take a bath. uh, this sense of, um, the most care, right? And that the field of love, the field of assuredness is, of our hearts, right, is broader than we can imagine, and across more planes than we can imagine. That there is something about that that is important as an exploration, and that we encourage that, in our lives, especially as we enter periods of time where fires and storms and, um, natural phenomena become so intense and so volatile. And we see that some of that is the result of unconsidered, uncareful, unkind human action, right? And that there is this response from the world of the unseen towards that. Now, whether that becomes in our minds like a question of deities and actual sort of sentient beings, or whether it's sort of just an understanding of some degree of causation that is phenomenally complex and out of our direct experience, but and almost unfathomable if it weren't so evident, then, it doesn't matter, right? This sense of like the caring for the metta that we practice, of like caring for the breath or caring for a chair or caring for the wind, or that it doesn't need to simply be situated in the that which we recognize as sentient beings. That this carefulness and our tenderness and the quality of heart that we can exude and abide in, so that it becomes all encompassing enough to actually create the stability of mind that's being encouraged, requires that, actually, right? It requires that sense that there's no exclusion, and that our own sort of frameworks of views and, the way we tend to construct the world and hold it together, the way that can be a limitation on our heart's capacity to care, is always something to be considered and thoughtful about, right? So that where do we sort of let go of some of the conceptualization that is our belief in how things are, as a way of expanding and allowing the tenderness to move and abide and become not only more sort of impactful, right, to create actually a sense of security and comfort for all of the beings around us, but also that creates a stability of mind that helps support the insight process. Mhm. So yeah, of course, everyone, if you are still interested in joining us next week, it's 4 Saturdays again that we'll be doing this. It's a little the timing will be a little bit tricky for the second couple sessions on the East Coast because it'll be later, but um, we do encourage anyone who'd like to join us to do it. And the information also is on the website to register for that. And yeah, that's kind of all I really wanted to sort of offer around that today. But yeah, sometimes just good to get these sort of other dimensions of our tradition and lineage. And so, as usual, well, there is some time for questions if folks have any about your practice. Um, we've been on a roll with like kind of amazing mm, explorations that everyone's going through. So whether it's something sort of technical, whether it's something more broad about your spiritual life, happy to check in about it. And if you have a question, you can do as Molly has done. At the bottom of the screen, there's a little button that says raise hand. You click on that, we'll see you. Otherwise, you can type into the chat to me that you have a question or wave your physical hand around, and I'll tend to see that as well. Let me just make sure people can unmute. Okay. Let's see, Molly, can you unmute there?
Uh,
Hey.
oh, I just wanted to quickly thank you so much for the talk and the offering that you're going to be doing around the learning of the Karniya Metta Sutta. Um, you know personally, but I don't know if I've ever gotten a chance to share that right after you made that available on a Sunday to us. It was during COVID, and we were locked down pretty tightly. I live on Maui, and it gave me this opportunity to um, find something that felt like grounded in the earth of Hawaii, and bringing in, what the little bit I knew about the chant at that point. I knew it in Pali, and I knew it better in Pali than in English. But I was able to learn it with a kumu here week by week. So it's just going to be so rich to be able to have this widening and deepening and more understanding. And I've never had a chance to share this with you or anyone that it's been something that I'll chant walking on the beach or when I'm inspired to feel the coming together of these elements. And at one point, I felt moved to share it. And I didn't know what was moving me because it was in a situation where a lot of people were sharing um, different things and like kind of a show almost. And it was a Dharma show. It was after a long retreat. But I thought, is this because I want to show off? And I went, there's a little of that. But it was more about how important it felt for people who don't know anything about Hawaii to be able to hear it. The language doesn't get shared. And it's coming back. It's coming back to life. And even if it's coming from a not Hawaiian, the way this was offered by the Kumu, and whenever I want to say her name, I can never remember. Will you tell me her name real fast again?
Keikuhi. Mhm,
Keikuhi, thank you.
mhm.
She was so generous about the way she said, you can do this. It's not a Hawaiian chant that we're holding like in the way we will hold precious our chants, but this is for you, do what you can with it. And that freedom and that wanting to share it was what finally gave me the permission inside to do it. And So anyway, I just feel like I really, really have wanted to share that with you for so long. It's been years and years. So thank you. And thank you. Can't wait to be in the middle of this.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. I know. It's because COVID, and it ended up being these years where it was so full, and in some ways I think this sort of natural kind of just like period of, I don't know, gestation, right? Of like it's was created, and those of us who are sort of like doing it, or it's in these sort of smaller ways, um, and then starting to feel that sense of we are, even a few years later, we are in a different time, and the particular question of, and push that we felt of offering this to Buddhists of Hawaii, right? So that there are many different lineages here,
Yeah.
um, and that have been here much longer than Vipassana, right, or Vipassana Hawaii, um, and we do there are many differences, right, between the many different traditions and lineages, and kind of that are sort of obvious and longstanding, and a number of kind of ecumenical organizations or efforts here and there, and but this sense of, because the story is about how are we in the land, right? I mean, it's like so literally about that, and like how are we in relationship to this place, and that is really there were a couple threads that led to this, but a lot of it did have to do with our, the Vipassana Hawaii had this land up in Kohala that we were working at and involved in, and that I was doing the Pali version of this chant when I would go out there, sort of before starting any work, as part of the sense of like what, asking permission, and that sense of, um, before you enter a space that you are new to, right? To have some sort of protocols around it. And so it became clear that if I really was trying to have that relationship with the spirits of this place, that it really should be in Hawaiian. I mean, it just seemed obvious, right? And that just it kind of naturally led to this process happening. But that it does bring up a lot of very like powerful questions and opportunities that I think we're really excited about. I mean, for example, you know, um, and I'm not going to remember a lot of the details, but Mary Foster, who
Hmm.
started like Foster Gardens, right? I mean, she was like the first Hawaiian Buddhist, and it had to do with like right after the overthrow, and her, she being like really in overwhelming grief. Her husband dies, and she encounters this. Oh, I'm going to forget. I think he was Sri Lankan monk, or he wasn't really. He was a Anagarika, I think, but a renunciate. Um, who was involved around this sort of like global effort to try to raise funds for um, rebuilding the temple at Bodhgaya. So this is like, it's just the history is just fascinating, right? That at that point had gone under like disrepair and destruction, and he ends up being a big kind of really missionary around the world and getting people interested in Buddhism. And she became a Buddhist, and and she was wealthy. She was a Lee. She and her husband was a kind of wealthy Haole guy, and so she had money to burn, and like help build the first Hongwanji temple, right, and help create the gardens in Honolulu, and was like incredible patron of Buddhism in Hawaii in an era and largely forgotten outside of that, until recently in the sort of scholarship that Pat, one of our long-term Honolulu Sangha members, was essentially re-established kind of her position. So anyway, her birthday is September 20th, and that's going to be the day after. our last session, and so there's going to be they've asked if people can at Foster Gardens, people who have been doing the class can actually go and chant the chant there in Honolulu at this event. So even that, right? It's like, oh my God, it's so beautiful, it's so amazing. Like if this even that if that's all that ever happens, like it's wonderful, right? But yeah, the sense of like what is our responsibility and what can we contribute, to our little our little slice of karma here in our lifetime. So anyhow, Molly, thank you for and Molly, I mean, you also created you've something like we talked about, but you actually did it, which was like print up that little booklet. Um, it's beautiful, simple kind of printing of this, and it's something anyway. We still would love to kind of figure out if there's a more of that we could kind of collaborate on and have a physical copy that might be available to more folks around. So anyhow, ongoing. But yeah, thanks. Hi, Audrey. Let's see. Can you unmute there?
Okay.
Great.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So this just feels like a really good opportunity for me to ask if you would talk about chanting in a different language. It's always been really challenging for me, and I think you've talked about it before, but I'd love to hear more. Yeah, I'm a very verbal person, and I love to know the words and w what I'm offering. And so, how do you negotiate with that? Thank you.
And do you mean sort of like the fact that we do most of the chanting we do in the Pali? Is that what you're?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and now you're gonna do it in a Hawaiian.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so it's
Yeah.
yeah. I tend to I've sort of been stubborn about like looking at the English,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to follow along in Pali when we've chanted at retreats and yeah, in retreats, both online and in person. And I would like to just kind of move into the spirit of, but I'm not sure, like, do people memorize what it is they're saying and then do it in another language and then they know kind of what they're saying, or do you just kind of get into the vibe of it, or
Mm-hmm. I think maybe I'll start with one thing that not only the conversation that I'm in now with folks around the oli, which is the Hawaiian word for chanting practice, but other kind of training I've had in it, and like how sophisticated all the technical stuff happening is, um, and the implications sort of energetically and spiritually. What became clear to me is I have had like some assumptions about chanting in our own lineage that I'm not totally sure are true, which is to say that there may, in fact, I know there are. They're definitely in Burma and throughout Burma. But I wonder about even in our own lineage. We have gotten a sort of a version of our lineage's relationship to chanting kind of passed down to us that I think is true, but also perhaps limited in the what might be a kind of broader spectrum of chanting forms, even just in let's just say Burma, but in general maybe the kind of Theravadan countries. So our kind of what we have learned was a lot of a lot of reservation around even chanting sounding too beautiful, right? That you don't want to make it sound too beautiful because it's something that people will get sort of enchanted by, and that's not the point. The point is sort of like attuning to the meaning, recording and remembering and rehearsing and kind of passing down the words, and passing the tradition along, really, or there are chants that are more practice oriented. So the longer metta chant, for example, that is more of a practice versus this is a reciting of the sutta. And you can see in that commentary, it talks a little bit about both kind of aspects to it. So it's so that there are places where yes, there is some kind of like you're saying, like feeling into the vibe of it, or feeling into that sort of quality of it. I think it's a place I want to learn more about in the question of I because there are a number of like protective parittas, which are called the chanting that is done as protective chants for different things, against snake bites, against blah 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 blah. Like there's the 100, not 100. There's a kind of classic set amount. Mostly, I think it's 18 parittas that are commonly chanted, largely by monastics, as sort of in blessings but also by lay people that are commonly known. And so there's a way in which they provide a common sort of Dhamma kind of library, like a simple form of like, here are the most important suttas, here are the ones that we're sort of like repeating a lot and we'll use for different blessing moments, right? The blessed Mangala Sutta is one of them. Anyway, there's a number of them, and there are suttas because they are, a lot of them sort of common. Anyhow, I do feel like there are aspects to chanting in the Theravadan tradition that have not been passed down to us or that we haven't learned that are more, we'll say, mystical, right? That are about sort of like transforming some sort of energetics, right? Of shifting, evoking things to happen, right? And there's a long lineage of that on one hand, like that someone's standing in the truth of something, giving some power to kind of create, have an impact that's actually material impact in reality. But it is not something that we have inherited or really practice. And some of that is intentional because in our lineage, there's a lot of effort on not manipulating, not trying to get spiritual powers. It's about developing wisdom and the insight and the release that comes from that, right? And that these other things can be a distraction. So that's that's not even your question, but I'm kind of offering that as a basis. In terms of why chant in Pali instead of English, that it's to us it's not very complicated. I mean, it really has to do with honoring the tradition that we've learned, honoring what's been handed down to us in the form that it's been handed down to us. Changes that we make or decisions that we make in terms of method are all wrestled with a lot, right? That it's not to say that we're only teaching in the sort of very strict form that was taught to us, but we take it seriously if there is when to change, when to emphasize something different, right? It's a very considered process for us. And in general, this has felt something that has been important to maintain as it's been passed down to us, in large part to honor the tradition, but to recognize like that without Pali, without some acknowledgement that this is the language that these teachings have been passed down in for thousands of years, you start to go into a process of losing a lot, right? That you're then sort of just reading the English language. You're just kind of you're moving further and further away from the sort of root connection of this lineage and of the teachings. Which isn't to say it doesn't change. It doesn't mean to say that it doesn't grow over time and adjust to the realities that it's in. But in a time where mindfulness is being taught with no relationship to the Buddha or the Sangha or Kama or enlightenment, or there's like it's turned into something that means nothing. I mean, and I won't go into it. I mean, I know I have at some other points where it can, in some places, is so extracted, right? It's like, oh, we're just going to take this chemical out of this plant and sell it, and it's the cure for everything, right? That it's like there are so many problematic aspects to that and whatever other things that it's like we're not the Dhamma police either, but we're going to do this, Like, we're not going to actually do that. We're going to try to keep this connection going. It is a way of, like, a pathetic, tiny way that we're some maintaining some integrity to the lineage that we've inherited, right? I mean, the truth is like, we should be teaching you guys 100 chants, right? I mean, this should be like, you know, 7 days a week we should be doing this or whatever, you know. So it's like, this is like the bare minimum, right? Is that like we have two metta chants that we're practicing together. So there's that. The other side, I say, and honest, it's like we've never had an English version that resonated. That didn't. It all they feel corny. You know what I mean? Like, that's sort of tends to be the case. Thich Nhat Hanh kind of can do that, and like, they're not afraid of corny. They're just like, we're just do, that's our vibe. You know, is like, we're so wholesome and it's beautiful, which is great. But I think that, like, if you know, Michelle will once in a while offer a Brahma Vihara chant that she kind of came up with on her own when her sister passed away. That's like very beautiful and very short. And it's not something I think we've ever considered being like, oh, let's all do that, you know. But it is an interesting notion, right? That it's not like we're opposed to finding something in a language that is our, you know, a birth language or something, right? That feels connected and that you can feel connected to the meaning in a different way. But there's a number of things we sort of, you know, negotiate around it. And then, yeah, I would just say, you know, that sense of, I think it is important. I think what your question is important. And I think it's good that you're not just mindless about it, and that you're like, what is this? And why are we doing it this way? Feels like healthy, you know. And I do feel like it is important to learn what you're actually saying, for sure, you know, and to know what it actually is, because there are other traditions, the Nambutsu stuff, of like, where they're like, it doesn't matter, you don't need to know what this is, just chant it, and it has magic properties. And, you know, those are more, you know, some of the kind of Pure Land, you know, traditions and stuff like that. But, you know, that is a different approach to chanting, where it's like, there's something else going on, right? So I would say yes, it is important to understand what it is. You know, often probably people aren't spending as much time as you are actually reading it and looking back and forth, and, you know, it can be interesting to look at just different translations, even, right? To see that whole process is complex, and not, you know, the long form chant that we do. You know, the translations that we're using there are significantly different from what I started doing, you know, many years ago, what was handed to me in terms of the other metta chanting. And they feel true, they feel real. They're not just like make believe. It's not just like, this is what we wanted to say. You know, they're real translations, but with a little more sort of nuance and a little bit different kind of emphasis. And so it doesn't mean it's more true, but this sense of, you know, there's a legitimate different ways of interpreting things. So anyhow, does that sort of get at
Totally.
the spectrum of it?
Perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm so
And
glad
thank you
this
for
is,
asking.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it.
There's a, I don't know, some years ago, there's a version of the Karaniya Metta Sutta that is like, you know, it's on iTunes, Spotify. It's like, you know, produced. It's like a musician did this, you know. Uh, and so it's interesting, you know, there's like pop music that integrates, you know, some of these things, and it's like, who knows, you know, who knows? It's good that people are trying different things, and it's good that people do it in English, or they do it whatever, you know. I mean, I think it is important. And I'll say, we'll share the resources again, but if you look at the translation into Hawaiian, the notes that Jake and Puakea put together about the process of translating it are very interesting, because what they really tried to do was, even though English is the one language they each could speak to each other, they were trying as best they could to do a translation from Pali into Hawaiian versus via English. And it's just super interesting. And that they'll say there are certain things that were much easier because the Hawaiian language and sort of cosmovision and sort of conceptual language concept frameworks are, there are certain words where they're like, oh, this carries all of those same connotations in a way that it doesn't in English, and you need to start adding all these other words in English to kind of like get what you're trying to say, or other things that are harder. So the notes on that are very interesting, especially because Pali is no one speaks it outside of the context of this tradition. It's a kind of quote unquote dead language, so you don't have a lineage of kind of native speakers that you can kind of touch back into. And of course, even languages change over millennia, but it is really interesting, and yes, sometimes you just sort of you go with the flow. I mean, it's when I go to a Hongonji temple or I go to a Zen service, I'll just do whatever they're doing. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I don't know. You just kind of you go with it and try to, the spirit of it, feels important. Yeah. Mm. Actually, and I think maybe just to end is this is a it's like basically it's actually another announcement I was going to make earlier. I don't think there will probably be much change to our rhythm in terms of the Sundays, but Michelle does need to go kind of visit Steve again this fall and kind of give him some support and just kind of help him figure out some stuff in Chiang Mai. And so I'm going to accompany her in kind of late October into early November. And I need to check in on some of our metadona work, and we'll kind of go to the border there and visit some of the schools we've been funding. And so it's actually, I need to kind of go do that as well. And I'm going to kind of do a little of my own sort of investigations of other themes and stuff out there. But I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to maintain the schedule. It's not that early in Thailand during the Sunday sittings, and as long as I have sort of stable internet connection, we should be able to kind of maintain that. But just that little heads up that kind of come late October, early November, we are going to be traveling, but probably we'll be able to just maintain the Sunday sittings as usual. That's the aspiration, at least. And of course, it's hurricane season. We've already had 2 major storms blow through, and that lasts until November too. So there's no security, as we know, in any event. But yeah, we aspire to some level of continuity. Yeah. All right, folks. Yeah. Good to see everyone this week. Glad you're doing well. Take good care. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you next Sunday, if not sooner. Aloha.